My name is Edward Wolcher. I'm the Curator of Community Programs here at Town Hall, and I'm so pleased and honored to welcome you to this afternoon's Urban Poverty Forum, the 8th annual Urban Poverty Forum, I believe, a program produced by Town Hall with Real Change and the Mahogany Project as part of Town Hall's Civic Series. So we've got a big range of organizations represented in the room tonight, this afternoon. I hope you've had a chance to visit with them. I'm going to list them out loud to just give them a little bit of love. ACLU of Washington, King County Bar Association, Make Change, Salish Sea Cooperative Finance, Seattle Financial Empowerment Center, the Tenants Union of Washington, Urban Forum Northwest, and Urban League of Metropolitan Seattle. Thank you so much to Real Change and the organizers there, as well as all the panelists and community partners today. I think this is every year one of the best opportunities to do real deep dive, systems level thinking, have art, conversation, and sort of deep policy inquiry into inequality and social justice concerns around poverty in our city and our region. I am very pleased to welcome the first part of the program today, which is the Mahogany Project, who have been a part of the Urban Poverty Forum for a few years and have a kind of new configuration, and they will open with a little bit of a performance for us. So put your hands together for the Mahogany Project.
God, grant me the serenity to change the things I can't, courage to change the things I can, wisdom to know the difference.
Hi, my name is Robin.
Hi, Robin.
Hi. I have something to tell you. I'm living paycheck to paycheck. I write about debt because I care about debt. I am in debt. I have student loans I'm paying on. I have 7 credit cards I'm paying off. My expenses are simple. I write a budget 2 times a month so that I can live a creatively comfortable life. I once rented a room for a year. It was a year of unemployment. And a second year while I was employed full-time so that I could give back to the very ones who helped me during a difficult time. I also paid down some debt. But those student loans, ooh, whew, those are going to take a while to pay off completely. My paycheck covers my rent and 1 of 2 student loans. My alternate check covers my second student loan, my tithes, a note on a 3-year-old used car I purchased last year, insurance, food, internet TV, medical dental payments, naturopathic remedies, clothing purchased once or twice a year, entertainment, and an occasional trip. I rarely spend more than $60 twice a month on food. Grocery outlet, Costco, and McPherson's Fruit and Veggie Stand help me do that. It goes something like this. Stretch out a 6-month supply of contacts to last 1 year. Costco. 24 cans of gluten-free coconut water. 24 cans, $1 each. Grocery outlet. 1 rotisserie chicken, $4.99. One bag of kale salad with poppy seed dressing. Also $4.99. Costco. And lots and lots and lots of fruits and veggies. For juicing, making homemade bread, to season my beans and homemade soups. $20, McPherson's. And once a month Dollar Tree deals. None of that toxic stuff that was in the news a few weeks ago, none of that. Deals like foil, sandwich bags, soap, tissue, paper towels, applesauce, C&H brown sugar, sun-made raisins. On any given day, something can go wrong to alter my budget. Credit cards are my lifeline. Bam! My backup plan. Solution? If I could earn equitable pay for the work that I do, I could wipe out my credit card debt. Where I work, I don't earn what my peers make. I also don't leave my master's degree training at home when I go to work. I use it 24/7. The answer is so much bigger than me. It could be systemic. But I'm the one who pays the price in debt. I'm living paycheck to paycheck.
My name is Ty.
Hey, Ty.
Hey, you know, I'm from a small town in the Midwest, and it was bad out there, you know. I was 17 years old, and I was getting bullied at school, and at home, it wasn't much better. I felt like I had to do something, you know, before I hurt myself or somebody else, so I wanted to get out, but I didn't know how. And then one day, I got a call from my man, Daryl. He had come out to Seattle a year earlier. He had graduated, and he came out here seeking opportunities, and he called me and he said, Ty, you should come out to Seattle. You can get a job and we can live together. And that was all I needed. That was all I needed. I took what little money I had. I got a Greyhound bus ticket, and I came out here with $150 in my pocket. And things were going good for a while. You know, me and Ty, we lived together in a small studio apartment. I turned 18, I got on the lease. I had a job where Daryl was working at this restaurant. And things looked good. I even went back and I got my GED. Yeah, I got my GED. But, you know, everything changed. The economy turned. Daryl and I, we lost our jobs. And look at us, 18, 19, just a high school diploma. Everybody out here's got college degrees. You got one, Robin. Yeah, all I got was that GED. I couldn't get any work. So, no work, no money, no rent, no apartment. We were on the streets. We got an eviction. So then we're like, you know, trying to couch surf at friends' houses, but we don't know a lot of people, right? We don't have a lot of support. We have no family out here. Soon we were on the streets, homeless. And we just started arguing. Me and Derek, we just started arguing, you know. There was so much pressure on us. So we just said, you go your way, I'll go my way. So Daryl left, and there I was alone. I was lucky, though. I was lucky because I got into a shelter, you know. I got into one of those transitional housing situations for young adults. And I was in there, and everything was good, and my case manager said, if you want to stay here, you either got to be working, right? Or you got to go to school. I was trying to find a job, but I couldn't find anything. And one day I was sitting in that community center just thinking and thinking and thinking, and the TV's on, and that ad came on TV. You know that one where they say, are you there at home sitting on your butt? Come to school. I didn't even know what kind of school that was. It wasn't the UW, it wasn't SPU. I didn't know what it was, but it said school. So I went down there the next day. I filled out all those financial aid forms. I don't know what I was signing. And next thing you know, I'm in school, okay? I was studying in school, doing all right. But one night I was walking home, and I was at the bus stop. It was dark, and I got jumped. I don't know why they jumped me. I don't have anything. I got jumped. Next thing you know, I'm in the hospital, and I don't have insurance. They came in and they said, hey, you can get some charity care. So I said, all right, signed some papers, but whatever I got wasn't enough to cover all those bills. Ambulance, medication, special procedures. It wasn't enough. The only thing that got me through that time was Daryl. He heard about me and being in the hospital. He came and visited me, told me he was going to be a dad. He and his girlfriend were doing really good, but he was working minimum wage jobs, security guard and CenturyLink field. He couldn't earn enough to provide for the family he was going to have. He couldn't even get an apartment because he got that eviction on his record. And me, I dropped out of school. Medical debt, college debt, eviction. I'm 25 years old right now. I had so many dreams, so many dreams. And now my life, it's just a nightmare. It's just a nightmare.
Hi. I'm Tina.
Hi, Tina.
I'm in debt. It's hard to say that. Debt nearly ended my life. It started out after I graduated from college, hopeful, full of dreams for the future, but already $20,000 in school loans. Then I got that credit card. You know, the one that's supposed to help you build your credit and become part of the American dream? American Express, that's the one. I lived on that card for nearly a year and a half before I landed my first job. But eventually I did, and it was a good paying job. So I was able to pay some of my loan and pay on that credit card and, save a little bit. Yeah, I thought I was going to be all right. Yeah, I think I am going to be all right. Oh, that credit card, was nearly $40,000 by now. We were going to be all right, though. I forgot to mention that I had married my high school sweetheart. And we got us a brand new apartment, filled it with brand new furniture. We even bought us a new car. Oh, everything was going just well. We were going to be okay. We were living the American dream. Then there was an economic climate change. I lost my job. My husband lost his job. And before long, we couldn't keep up. We lost everything. We lost the apartment. We had to sell our furniture. the car was repossessed. Oh my God, this was devastating. We paid our bills. I could not see my way out of this debt hellhole. It just wasn't lifting. I became deeply depressed, fearful, despondent, rejecting my husband and pushing him away. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to do. I contemplated and I even attempted suicide. This was the only way I could see my way out of this downward spiral. But there was help. I got help. People, don't wait so long to seek help. If you ever find yourself in this position, call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, 1-800-273-TALK. 1-800-273-TALK. The new debt. It's a community issue. Thank you.
My name is Neil Lampe. I'm one of the founding members of the Urban Poverty Forum. The Urban Poverty Forum exists to open a dialogue about the systemic issues surrounding urban poverty and to unite a diverse community of care, including faith-based organizations, nonprofits, and concerned citizens in addressing the problems that are faced among the poorest of us. Our first speaker today will be Jonathan Grant, Executive Director of the Tenants Union of Washington. The Tenants Union was started by volunteers in 1977. The Tenants Union has a long history of victories for housing justice through education, organizing, and advocacy. These victories were led and supported by membership. After a 5-year campaign and almost 20 years for the Tenant Union, the Seattle City Council unanimously voted in the Rental Registration and Inspection Ordinance, a law that will dramatically shift the power imbalance between landlords and tenants and hold the slumlords in our community accountable. I like it when somebody's honest like that. Jonathan has been behind some notable moves to try to make Seattle a less of a nightmare for vulnerable renters. He supports rent control and caps on move-in fees, and he wants the city to buy up affordable housing before developers can turn it into luxury condos. Amen. A more complete bio may be found in your program. So this time I'd like to ask everyone to join me in welcoming Jonathan Grant.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm John Grant. I'm the director of the Tenants Union of Washington State. I see some familiar faces. I want to thank the Mahogany Project for that really amazing performance, and it really resonated with me because those are the stories that I hear at the Tenants Union day in and day out. We're here to talk about debt, but I think before we can talk about the origins of where debt comes from and how it falls harder on different members of our community, we need to talk about class, we need to talk about race, and we need to talk about wealth. In the United States right now, white households have about 13% more wealth by median income than African American households. And where does that wealth inequity come from, right? The system of debt is part of it, but a large part also is that it's a structural system that was created, it was invented, right? In 1937, Congress created the FHA, which is an entity that created loans for low-income families. It was an attempt at the time to address the foreclosure crisis of a different era. And what came out of that legislation back in the 30s was a system of redlining and a system that gave loans to white families to the exclusion of African American families. And when we talk about debt and we talk about wealth, right, how do we transfer wealth in our society? A lot of it is through home ownership. And this created a systemic disparity between the transfer of wealth from one generation to another, primarily, right, to the detriment of African American families. Now, in Seattle, you know, we have the unfortunate position of now having the highest rent increases of any city in the nation. Now, that also falls on communities in a different way. Even though people of color are not a majority in Seattle, at the Tenants Union, folks of color are over 2/3 of the people that we see come into our door. You know, when you look at the Central District and look at the amazing cultural history of that area, if you were to actually look at a map and show the African American families that had lived in the Central District and do a time lapse of where they live now, it's just radically different, right? And we are seeing this happen everywhere in Seattle. Because the thing that we need to really identify and talk about here is that there is a direct connection between class and race in this country. And a lot of that has to do with policies that were created to create that disparity. So at the Tenants Union, one of the things that we see all the time is buildings that are targeted by developers to flip into luxury condos or into luxury rental housing. And more often than not, what they'll say to folks is, well, don't worry, you have choices. You can move wherever you want, right? Just, I hear this from conservative legislators in Olympia all the time. Well, what's the problem? I mean, they're renters. They have freedom to go wherever they want. They're not tied to a mortgage. And I'm like, that's just insane. Are you kidding me? Where are folks going to live in this city? The buildings that are affordable to folks who are earning minimum wage, right? That's $18,000 a year. Can't afford rent at $3,000 a month for like a 1 or 2 bedroom unit, right? That's just, the math just doesn't pencil out. So at the Tenants Union, we have been working in multiple buildings across this city to create sites of resistance from the speculation that's happening in the market. And I am so sick and tired of hearing developers, well, all we need to do is build more housing. The housing that's getting built is not affordable. New construction is just way beyond, it creates housing that's not affordable, it's way beyond the means of low-income and working class families in this city. Now, I think what is so distressing to me is that I've worked so long with the city council to try to address some of these issues, and rather than try to create policies that actually help low-income people and particular communities of color, we are seeing a wholesale deference to developers. Now, when you look at an area like South Lake Union, or what they're now calling Amazonia, right? They're just building and building and building. Well, the city council had an opportunity to impose what's called an incentive zoning policy that would have brought in millions of dollars to the city. And there was basically a spectrum of policies that were available. One would have, created potentially, thousands of units of affordable housing. And that was a proposal put forward by Councilmember Nick Licata. Another proposal was put forward by other council members who are bankrolled by developers, right? And that would have resulted, had their proposal been passed, it would have resulted in, I think it was something like 100 units. And when they defined affordability, they said it was 80% of the area median income. Now, for those of you that don't know, that's like that's if you earn $45,000 a year, right? So there's a real problem with how this city prioritizes its policy solutions so that rather than aim for, upper income folks, moderate income folks, the need is at the lowest incomes bracket, right? The buildings that are being targeted by developers in other cities are protected by policies like rent control or rent stabilization. That prevents landlords from doubling or tripling rents that we're seeing happening across the city. I had a family come in and they got a $1,000 rent increase. And, there was one tenant I came in, he lives up in Eastlake. He had just fallen and broken his arm. And he asked us, he got a I think it was like a 70% rent increase. And he asked his landlord, can I have more time? I can't possibly pay this, in the amount of time that I have. And the landlord said, well, I'll give you 15 more days, but then you got to get out. And that tenant was, I was talking to him, and he was like, well, I don't know where I'm going to move. I'm going to live on a boat. And I said to him, well, at the very least, we can't get rent control yet because of the conservatives in the state legislature, but you can at least share your voice so that we can change the state law to give people more time. And we went down together to Olympia and testified in front of the legislature to pass an ordinance to require at least people to have a little bit more time before they get these kind of rent increases. We're trying to fight for this 90-day bill that's still being fought right now down in Olympia. And when I was talking to legislators, I was like, he broke his arm, the landlord gave him 15 days. Tenants shouldn't have to break their arms for more time from a rent increase. This is crazy. And, the fact of the matter is that these politicians are not going to move until we make them move. The Tenants Union is organizing across the city right now for a broader movement for rent control and for better tenant protections. If you want to learn more about it, you should go to our website at tenantsunion.org. If we're going to actually move the dial on this crisis, and again, we're talking about debt, right? People can't, are living paycheck to paycheck. Never mind saving money or paying off debt, right? You got to pay the rent. And until we actually have policies to limit the amount that landlords can increase the rent, we're going to continue to be faced with this crisis. Now, we've made some moves, right? Like the city passed the minimum wage, the $15 minimum wage. First in the nation to do that, and we should be proud of that accomplishment. But I got to say, I'm concerned because that policy is just being enacted this year. Landlords are looking at that as an opportunity, and they have no limit on how much they can raise the rent, right? So this incredible moment where we actually did something to address economic inequality could be fleeting. It could be we could completely miss this opportunity because that's money that landlords can just recoup in your rent. And we're seeing that across the city. Now, to me, it's kind of a double-sided, two sides of the same coin, right? Like, you got to address income inequality through raising wages, but you also have to limit rent increases. Otherwise, it's like pouring, a vase of water down the drain. And it's interesting too because the Tenants Union fought for rent control in 1980, and that was the same year that Ronald Reagan got elected. The initiative didn't pass. Ronald Reagan did get elected. And it's interesting too because at the same time that was going on, the industry did exactly what they did last year when they tried to preempt the minimum wage ordinance by going to Olympia and passing a ban. The rental industry went down to Olympia and passed a ban on rent control, and we've been living with that for like the last 25 years, right? So what I find really interesting about that is that when the landlord successfully passed the ban on rent regulation, they created an exemption. And when you go and read the law, do you know what the exemption is? It's for boat mortgages. Now, why would there be an exemption for boat mortgages? That seems really random, right? It's because the wealthy yacht owners didn't want to have to pay exorbitant fees on their boats. So the yacht owners got rent control, and tenants did not, right? Now let's think about that, right? Because I think that shows, like, this is not about good public policy. There's all these arguments that, oh, well, rent control, look at San Francisco, da-da-da-da-da. Well, the thing about rent control in San Francisco is that people point to that as a failure. Well, actually, rent control works great in San Francisco. The problem is that they have the same problem that we have here, and that the industry went down and used their power in the state capitol to start repealing it. That's why rent's going crazy in San Francisco. It's not because rent stabilization isn't working, it's that it was working and it's getting repealed in chunks. Here, we don't even have the opportunity to repeal it, right? It's already banned. So until we come together as a community and start organizing across our neighborhoods and in our buildings, we are going to continue to get more of the same. And it doesn't matter how much we increase wages if landlords can just continue to increase the rent. And if that's the case, then people are going to continue to be paying paycheck by paycheck, and there's going to be no ability for folks to pay off the debt that they have. And if we're going to address this issue, we do have to finally tackle this issue of rent. Other cities have done it, Seattle can do it too, but it's only when we come together as a community and fight for it can we actually make a change. And I know this because I've seen it, it's not just rhetoric, right? We organized in a building in Squire Park Plaza, it's in the Central District, and the tenants there were informed that it was a nonprofit too, that's what kills me. A nonprofit-owned building that had restricted rents was going to sell the building to the highest bidder on the market. And they were going to make a lot of money, and it was a real problem. The tenants found out about it. We started organizing meetings in that building, and the tenants came together and said, and you know, this is not right, we need to stop this. And we did some investigating and found that the city of Seattle actually had a loan to CADA, which was the nonprofit. The loan, the city was basically concerned because the city wanted the loan to get paid off. And the city was actually encouraging the nonprofit to sell to a private developer. And we were like, this is crazy. There's tens of millions of public dollars that was invested in this building to keep it affordable for working class people. And you're gonna sell it to a private developer who's gonna jack up the rents? And that was essentially what the city was going to do until the tenants came together, organized, and spoke up. And they held a press conference in front of their building, and they called out for Mayor Merri to do the right thing and encourage the nonprofit who had, they had this hook in the nonprofit with this loan and say, you need to not sell this to a private developer, right? This is the wrong thing to do. And the mayor did the right thing, and he backed up the tenants, and finally, it was transferred into the hands of another nonprofit that agreed to keep the rents affordable to the tenants living there. Now, you don't hear those stories all the time. The stories that you hear in the news are how rents are getting jacked up left and right. And that's true, that is happening. But when people organize and come together, you can truly make a difference. The Tenants Union has been organizing in other buildings too. We were organizing at the Theodora Apartments up in Ravenna, and also the Lockhaven Apartments in Ballard. And I think what kills me about that is that it's the same developer for both of those buildings that's flipping them into luxury housing. And his name is John Goodman, and he works for Goodman Real Estate. And my favorite line out of our chants when we were picketing his office was, good man, be a better man. He didn't like that. And Goodman Real Estate is not the only, they're not the only bad actor out there, right? And in fact, a lot of people praise him for the work that they do in affordable housing, which, again, is just ironic to me. But I think with the Lockhaven Apartments, it was 100 units of housing that was affordable to working class people. It was privately owned, and they sold it to Goodman Real Estate. And this is like almost an anatomy of speculation, right? Like, how does this actually happen? Well, the owner gave the tenants all these bogus notices. They said, you have to be out in 20 days. Well, actually, that's illegal. It's illegal because of a law that the Tenants Union got on the books called the Just Cause Eviction Ordinance, a law that we are now fighting to get in the city of Spokane as well. Now, we were able to get those notices rescinded, and so they started issuing rent increases to everybody, and they started trying to vacate the building. Well, the tenants organized and came together, and we marched through the streets of Ballard. And do you know where that march ended up? It was 2 miles away at John Goodman's private residence. He lived 2 miles from this building of working class people who have been living in that community for over 20 years. And John Goodman grew up in Ballard. He went to Ballard High School. And he's one of the primary agents that's displacing the same families that are living in that community. Well, a lot of people are kind of like, ooh, he went to his private house. I'm against rent increases, but that's kind of like pushing boundaries. Let me explain what his private residence is like. It's a commercially zoned marina. right? He's got boats lined up in front of his house. And it was just 2 miles away. So the tenants marched through Ballard, they marched to his house, and they held a rally. And they actually demanded, you know what? We want affordable housing in this unit, in this building. We want relocation assistance for the folks that can't afford the rent increases, and we want more time. We didn't get all of those demands, but we got tens of thousands of dollars for tenants for relocation assistance, and also more time for folks. And that's not stopping the rent increases from happening, but that's a hell of a lot more that people would have got had they not otherwise organized. So the reason I say that is that I don't want people to get all be all doom and gloom. When people come together and organize, they can really make a difference. And there are more and more buildings that are coming up across Seattle that are facing this kind of displacement. And we're seeing a real move, a real shift on the city council, especially with the new redistricting that's happening, right? And all of a sudden, city council members are running to the left. Well, we need to see this as an opportunity and actually try to push the council to do more. The council has never asked the state for the authority to have rent control, right? They never passed a resolution that said, we want rent control. We need to change that. If the city itself isn't demanding that in an explicit way, first of all, that's, to me, indicative of a council that is completely out of touch with what's going on in our city, with the people that are being displaced en masse. We need to come together and have the city council affirmatively say, we need rent control, we need rent stabilization. Otherwise, we will continue to see this kind of displacement happening across the city. And people will continue to get stuck in this cycle of debt, and we'll continue to see people being evicted en masse from their communities. Now, I think we can do it. And we're just starting this effort, and we're calling it the Anti-Displacement Campaign. And if you want to get involved in the anti-displacement campaign and assist tenants and work and organize with tenants to fight the rent increases in their building, again, go to our website at tenantsunion.org, sign up for our action alerts, and you can also come to our monthly meetings where we're going to be planning some of the campaign efforts that are going on there. So I guess, that is essentially it. In conclusion, I just want to say, again, we can accomplish a lot if we come together as a community and organize. I also have to give a plug. I announced last week that I am going to be running for Seattle City Council. Thanks. I'm going to be running at large. I'm going to try to take out one. Actually, our campaign has had some success. Councilmember Sally Clark has stepped down. A week after that I announced that I was running, so take that for what you will. And I haven't formally declared which seat, but if you want to find out more, you can go to electjohngrant.com. And I think we all need to come together and really put pressure on the political system for rent control, and not just rent control, but for many other economic justice issues. It's not just one, silver bullet to this problem, but we can definitely start by tackling one of the biggest issues that people are facing across the city. Anyways, that's all I have to say. I'll be over there if you want to ask more questions, and thank you very much.
Our next speaker will be Pamela Banks. She's the president and chief executive officer of the Urban League of Metropolitan Seattle. Her work and service to others began in the community in 1982. As a community organizer in the City Housing and Human Services Department, she served in positions of rising responsibility, including the director of community outreach for former Mayor Greg Nichols. The Urban League of Metropolitan Seattle was founded in the 1930s. The Urban League provides housing foreclosure prevention, mediation, financial education, credit counseling, criminal expungement classes. Banks seeks to increase the Urban League's historic program focused on education, employment, housing, and health, and with an emphasis on the African American community of Seattle and the Puget Sound region. A more complete bio for Pamela can be found in your program. Please join me in welcoming Pamela Banks.
Boy, that light's bright. Good afternoon. How is everyone today? Good. Thank you for coming. I know you can spend your time, your Sundays in other places, but this is such an important topic, not only to the African American community, but to the greater Seattle area. I want to thank Town Hall for sponsoring this and real change in the Mahogany Project. And Jonathan, you really touched on topics that are near and dear to my heart as a Central Area resident for 20 years. As I watched my neighborhood gentrify, it's very painful. I've lived in the Central District for 20 years. The Urban League has been located in that area since 1972. Unfortunately, we got in some financial problems and we had to sell our building. And so now we are renters in a building we used to own. I was fortunate enough that I had a stellar career in the city, and I stumbled upon a townhome that they built right when they had condemned all the property to build I-90, and they turned around and started selling that property off in the early 90s. And there's a small development that got built across the street from the Wood Technology Center. It was the first condominiums that were built in the Central District in probably like 50 years. And I was just lucky enough to be able to buy one. Today, on my salary, I couldn't afford my home. And that's going across, you know, the whole central area. And the project that Jonathan talked about, Squire Park, that nonprofit actually had also built Welch's Plaza, which sits on the corner of 23rd and Jackson, kitty corner from Starbucks. And that project got built with 38 workforce units of housing. So they had market rate housing, rental housing, low-income housing, and then they built a condominium complex. Well, that recently sold in this past year, and those 36 or 38 units of affordable housing are now gone. They have, when you get tax credits and the city uses bonds, you can only require the developer to hold on to them for a certain period until the loan, that piece of the loan's paid off. So that loan was paid off, and now those units are gone. And now they're crazy rents. I think they're in upwards to like $2,200, $2,500 for two-bedroom units, which is triple my mortgage. And so what's going on in the Central District is impacting other areas. But as Jonathan said, when it happens in the Central District, it's not only an economic issue, it's a race issue, it's a social justice issue, because black people were redlined. That's the only place we could buy housing in our city, and now we can't afford to live there. The Urban League was started in the 1900s. We actually have one of the oldest urban leagues on the West Coast, and it was to help African American people as they fled the South, as they fled Jim Crow, sharecropping, slavery. And they were headed up north into the New York and Midwest, and they got on trains and ended up on the West Coast, and that's how my African American family ended up in the Pacific Northwest. Was my grandfather was a Pullman porter, and the Urban League decided to sister organization NAACP. While the NAACP was fighting civil rights through the courts as an all-volunteer organization, the Urban League incorporated as a entity to provide specific educational opportunities, housing opportunities, employment opportunities, and to deal with health disparities that African Americans face because they were banned from education, they couldn't own property, they couldn't get health care, and of course they couldn't go to school. And so that's why the Urban League was born. Like he said, I'm the second woman in 85 years to hold this position. I'm honored and humbled by it each and every day that I get up to do this work. One of the new debts that we are facing in our community and communities across this country is called legal obligation and fines, LOFs. People heard about LOFs? Have you ever heard of LOFs? I'm getting ready to educate you about LOFs. It is the modern day debt. Debtor's prison, that's what we call it at the Urban League. Currently, 1 in 5 Washington state adults has a criminal record. Between 80 and 90% of these people are charged with felonies, in our country or in our state are poor or indigent by the court standard. The majority of these folks that are charged and convicted they lack education. Most don't have high school diplomas. And the majority of them have below average literacy rates. The majority of these people have not had access or opportunities to get good education and or employment. When you don't have good education, you can't get good jobs. And 60% of the people who have been incarcerated remain unemployed 1 year after they're released from prison. They struggle when they get out of prison, because as Jonathan said, if you have a felony, you can't get subsidized housing. You're automatically banned. And so they struggle. Do they pay rent? Do they buy food? Do they get quality child care? They can't get car loans. They're on the bus. They're raising the bus rates. And in Washington State, these individuals get pushed deeper into poverty by this court-imposed debt that we call LOFs. Many courts routinely impose LOFs without even considering whether the person has the ability to pay them when they get out or not. And the court-imposed debt definitely is a major barrier, and now it is part of the new debt of our society. I'm going to share a story about a young man that I actually met when he was incarcerated. I used to go up and volunteer at the Black Prisoners Caucus up in Monroe Penitentiary. And the only way that the Black Prison, it's the oldest volunteer organization and a penal institute in the country, and the only way that the Black Prisoners Caucus can meet is if they have outside sponsors and volunteers. So for 4 years, twice a month on Fridays, I'd go up to the prison with a whole bunch of other people to sponsor this group. And I met this young man named Ardell Shaw, and he was released from prison a little over a year ago. And I'm going to read you a story really quick. My name is Ardell Shaw. I have been struggling to pay my LOFs since my release from prison. I grew up in South Seattle, and when I was in my 20s, I was arrested and charged with 3 counts of narcotics with the intent to distribute. I was given a 14-year sentence. Ardell he served every day of that 14 years, I want you to know. When he was sentenced, his LFOs, he had 3 charges, and so when he was sentenced, they gave him a $600 fine on each of the 3 charges. So that was a total of $1,800. When he came out, how much do you think that debt was? Yeah, it's $22,000. So he appealed the charges and he lost. So when he came out, they were, $20-something thousand. He appealed it and he lost, and then they charged him $4,000 in court costs. So his poor credit has made it extremely difficult to find a place to live. He couldn't open a bank account. He was denied jobs because he had bad credit. He couldn't find employment. He finally was able to get a car loan, and his interest rate was 29%. And it's all because of these legal obligations and fines. Currently, the state legislature needs to reform the LOF process, and we, along with the ACLU, and I'm glad they're here today, with the Urban League and many other nonprofit organizations and defender organizations, are working to try and get this to happen. Because these are a major barrier for people trying to re-enter in society after they've been incarcerated. And people should not accrue 12% interest on a fine while they're locked up. And you can also, if you don't pay, you can get put back in jail. So that's Ardell's story. I'll tell you the happy side. Ardell came through a program that the Urban League, we're the fiscal agent for, and helped create this program. It's called Career Bridge. It's focused on African American men with multiple barriers to employment. And it is focused, and probably about 50% of the men that have come through this program have had some incarceration or have been involved in the criminal justice system. So Ardell comes out. I hadn't seen him in 8 years, and I'm at the community meeting, and he walks up. He's like, "Miss Banks, do you remember me?" And I was like, "Oh my God, of course I remember you." He had heard about Career Bridge because we actually go and do a training in Monroe, and the idea of Career Bridge came out of the Monroe Black Prisoners Caucus. The men that are there that are doing life, many of them doing life for drug crimes, for drugs that are now legal that are getting sold on 23rd and Union, is true talk. They said, you know, they started seeing younger and younger men come in generations. When I volunteered up there was a grandfather, a father, and a son that were all incarcerated. There were first cousins, there were uncles, and it was heartbreaking. Like, it made me do that work for 4 years until my job wouldn't allow me to do it anymore. And Ardell came out, he said, I heard about Career Bridge, you know, we've been working on it, and he came through the program. And it was a pilot program that the Office of Economic Development and Human Services Department of the City of Seattle funded. And the first year that it was a pilot, the city ran it, and then they do a grant process, an RFP process. You know, we wrote the grant, we were fortunate enough to get it, but there were a whole bunch of other nonprofits, small nonprofits that worked with us day to day to get it done. There were people from churches, the Chance Society, just a bunch of small nonprofits. And the Urban League luckily was fortunate to get the contract. We did it as a pilot project in 2013, and then in 2014. It was a pilot in 2013. It was we ran it in 2014, and we got it again in 2015. It's an 80-hour work training program that we are in partnership with South Seattle College, and I'm really pleased to say that this year, the men that get through it get 6 college credits. They are registered as students at South Seattle College. They get a student ID. I was able to raise private funds where we're actually able to pay the men a small stipend to go through it. Because you're asking men to go through an 80-hour training, which is over 4 weeks. It's a half a day, every day. But a lot of them don't have like the computer skills, so they need like 3 days of computer skills. Men that have been locked up for 14 years, can you imagine the technology, how much technology has changed in the last 2 years, let alone in the last 14? And so Ardell came through the program, and I was like, you know, I want to create a way to hire men so I can show the city of Seattle, the government, that these men can work, that they need opportunities not just to go into survival jobs in warehousing and Fair Start. You know, those are great positions, I kid you not, but to get away from that low wage job into a career. And so we created this internship program. Ardell got one of the interns. He had to apply. We took him through a whole hiring process. He was one. He did so well that I extended his internship in 2014, and on January 2nd, I hired him as a full-time employee with benefits to the Urban League of Metropolitan Seattle. So I truly, truly get chills when I tell that story, because I see this man every day, and he can't afford to live in Seattle. I started him at $15 an hour. He lives in Kent. Because even at $15 an hour, and I'm glad that we are phasing it in. In April, it goes to 11, and then it eventually get to 15. But that is not a wage that you can earn and afford to rent in our city. So everything that Jonathan said is, yeah, it's great we're going to be at 15, but you can't afford $1,500 for one bedroom at Squire Park. We know this. And so we have to work at the state legislature around the LOFs, and that's a good example. I had a lot of statistics, but I didn't want to read you. I'd rather tell a story. But I did want to say on Friday, we got a news flash from our friends at the ACLU. There's a couple bills down there to deal with all these issues around the legal obligation and fines and debt and all of that. And so on Friday, February 20th, 2015, the ACLU announced that the Legal Financial Obligations Bill, it's House Bill 1390, passed out of the Judiciary Committee on Thursday, the 19th. This is fantastic news. That Senate bill, there was another Senate bill that was heard in the Law and Justice Committee on February 17th. Friday was the deadline for all bills to be voted out of their committee of the origin in order to stay alive. The only bill that made it out was HB 3090, and it will be one that we will push to advance. March 11th is the deadline by when bills need to be voted out of the House of Origin. If and when HB 3090 passes out of the House, it gets to be heard in the Senate Law and Justice Committee. Again, we need support. We need people to go down there and say these bills have to pass in order to address debt and poverty in our city and our state. And oh, hi, Miss Taylor. My housing director's here. I didn't see her. I want to give her a lot of credit because she got all this information from me because I've been crazy. But I also want to give her credit because one of the other great things that we do at the Seattle Urban League and have been doing for several years is we've been dealing with the mortgage foreclosure crisis. And Ms. Taylor actually created a program with other partners, but we've kept hundreds of people in their home by educating them about their rights when they got foreclosure notices. And we continue to do free classes around criminal expungement, foreclosure, credit, financial education. What am I forgetting? Anything? Okay, she's shaking her head. No, I think I caught the third Saturday of every month at Miller's Community Center. The criminal expungement classes is really important because that allows people to seal their records, and in order to, and then you're able to get housing and get jobs and all of that stuff. One of the good things, and I'll say this, the last thing about Career Bridge, is we are educating the men on how to talk about their criminal history to employers. We're very upfront with employers. We're like, these men were incarcerated for these reasons. They've paid their debt to society. They should not have to wear an F and a felony on their forehead for the rest of their life. And that's why it's so important for us to work at the state and local level around banning the box and all of these good things that we've done in our city. But again, the disparities are huge in the African American community and the communities of color against white folks, and so we need all of you to work with us to get these things passed so that we can start dealing with the debt and poverty in our city. And I thank you.
I met our next guest at the Martin Luther King Jr. March Committee, where I wasn't sure what I was doing there. Maybe you haven't noticed, but I'm white. And I was kind of wringing my hands, anxious, and like, is this really my issue? Am I imposing on somebody's right to be involved in organizing, and a whole bunch of nonsense, right? But Eddie Rye looked me dead in the eye and he said, "Consider yourself empowered, young man." I didn't consider myself empowered, but I knew I had an ally, and that was a relief. That was something that I was happy to have. Eddie has a long history in the civil rights struggle in the Pacific Northwest. He's been active in the occupation of Beacon Hill School in 1972, the location that now houses El Centro de Raza, chairing the Housing Committee of the Central Seattle Community Council Federation, which he released the first report on redlining in Seattle and led the Community Reinvestment Act of 1978, and assisting in organizing the first MLK March in 1983 to protest Congress's lack of action on the MLK holiday bill and to demand that the city of Seattle put up the MLK Way signs on the formerly named Empire Way. By the way, our MLK March is one of the biggest marches in the nation. I just wanted to plug that. Eddie Rye hosts the weekly radio talk show, the Urban Forum Northwest, broadcast live every Thursday from 2 to 3 p.m., and Saturdays from 8 to 9 a.m. on KKNW 1150 a.m. A more complete bio for Eddie can be found in your program, so please join me now in welcoming Eddie Rye.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. Since this is Black History Month, I'm going to go back a little bit on debt. When you look at the conditions of African Americans who work 250 years for free, you can certainly see why the United States of America became an economic powerhouse. Anyone having millions of people work for free would definitely become a powerhouse. The sad thing is when we had a country like Haiti that, in the whole Western Hemisphere was filled with free labor, with slaves from Africa. But here's a situation like in Haiti where Toussaint Louverture ran out Napoleon's army. You would think that he'd be greeted as a liberator by everyone. For about the next 100 years, Haiti had to pay reparations to France with the support of the United States because we ruined France's textile mills because they didn't have the free labor picking the cotton. Just a good example. The other thing we have to look at is that even when the Emancipation Proclamation, there were certain promises that were made to African Americans, like 40 acres of land and a loan of a government mule. We didn't even get to own it, but a loan of a government mule. As you know, presidential politics removed all of the African Americans that were sitting in high positions, including 2 African American members who were appointed to the U.S. Senate, a number of secretaries of states and other elected officials down south. When Johnson made that decision, he removed the federal troops and the Ku Klux Klan went wild. African Americans were driven off of their property. It is estimated that millions of acres of land was lost because there were illiteracy rate amongst African Americans. When they came out with any papers, there was no one that could read them or sign them. So we're looking at that issue. We're looking at the fact that we never got the land. We come down to where we get to education. I'm going to round up real quick because my mother's 93 today and I came singing happy birthday to her. But we look at what we see right now in the city of Seattle. We talk about housing and the mass exodus outside. One of the reasons why a lot of African Americans have left this area, the central area of Seattle, is because 1990 and 2010, over $3 billion in federal money that could have gone to African American businesses went elsewhere. Either the front companies, and right now we have it today, you've probably seen on King TV for a year about these women companies, and I want women to have equal opportunity with everybody else. But this whole program was set up, it was to bring contracts and jobs to these communities that had been denied. Now, these white women-owned trucking companies are doing well, except for I never see a woman driving the truck. So what that does is destroy our community because of the fact a lot of blacks were involved in trucking. It was a predatory practice, and it ran these folks out of business. The other thing is that in even the federal programs right now, there is a certain goal you have to meet and things like this, but you don't have to choose an African American. If you are keeping a business going and you don't get selected 3 or 4 times, you're out of business. So then you lower the goal because there's no one there. But the most tragic thing happened in 1998 when Initiative 200 was passed, RCW 49.60.400, which says there will be no preferential treatment. That has been used to deny African Americans employment. That has been used to deny African American promotions. It's been used to deny African American contracts. It's been used to deny everybody contracts. In 2013, the state of Washington did less than 1% with all women and all minorities in the state of Washington. Now in 2014, they had an increase. They did 1.2%. Now you're talking about a passing legislation to curtail preferential treatment. If the white guys are getting over 99%, what in the hell do we call that? And then 98% the next week? The next year? It's absolutely ridiculous. Then you look at, let's go to the University of Washington. Never do more than 1/10 of 1% with African Americans. They built a football stadium a couple of years ago, cost $280 million. A black contractor or business didn't get a dime of that money. But who will be making the money for the University of Washington? Black football players on that field, not getting paid, modern day slavery. The NC2A is nothing but a cartel. And it's an absolute shame that these young men spend all that time, the coaches go to their house, they see that their family's in poverty, and they don't leave the family with a dime. They bring the kids to the University of Washington, they make money for the institution, and some of them don't even eat properly when the season's over. Absolutely ridiculous. They need to be paid. I'm glad the players from Northwestern finally filed a lawsuit. Last year the NC2A tournament brought in $4 billion. And the MVP of that tournament, Shabazz Napier, admitted after the game some nights he went to sleep hungry. It's just an absolute shame. It's modern day slavery. You can call it whatever you want to, but that's the way I see it. And everybody should have a responsibility to demand equality for everyone. And we see these young kids out here doing what they do. The only time you hear about them is they score a touchdown and get in trouble. But that has got to stop. When we had more African American students at the University of Washington in 2014, we have in 2015, that's a serious problem, a very serious problem. The other issue we have is that we're sitting here talking about rent control. We have people right now, little kids going to school hungry. If school's not open, they might not eat. But you let somebody talk about starting a war, all of a sudden we can find billions and trillions of dollars to kill somebody, but we can't find millions to feed people. And we got to turn this thing around. We can't be silent because somebody say ISIS is a threat and the president's not doing enough. That's a bunch of crap. The president got Osama bin Laden. He's killed more terrorists than any other president you know of. At least he wasn't thumbing his nose like a former president was doing. And then you look at where he brought the country from. But unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, it's the 1% that's prospered more than anyone else, even with President Barack Obama being there. Now, I'm sure that if Barack Obama was white, I just have to be honest, he would probably be one of the greatest presidents ever in the history of this country. He might have his face on Mount Rushmore. But the racism is alive and well in this country, and the Republican Party and the other right-wing zealots are fueling the flames, and a lot of people who are not doing well say, well, if it wasn't for those black folks and those Latinos, we'd be doing a lot better. That's not the case. They need to re-examine where they are. So I would say that I'm glad to see this gathering here. I do want folks to understand that we are where we are now because of the system. We have people who are able to use all their resources, all their funds to get things that they want. They do it in housing, they're doing it in contracting, they're doing it in education. But we have to hold some public institutions accountable. The University of Washington has got to stop discriminating. It has to stop. And we should demand that these student athletes be paid. If you're a first round, and the sad thing about it is that now the colleges and universities have imposed with the NC2A, if you're a good football player, you got to play at that school for 3 years before you can go to the pros and make some money and feed your family. If you're a good basketball player, you got to go to school for 1 year before you leave. And most of them do one and done. They can go right from high school to help their family. That's what they have in terms of generating revenue for themselves. But they're denied that. So we continue with this whole system of denial for African Americans. Even where we have abilities to generate revenue and income, we're denied because we have laws passed to make sure that we generate the major white institutions the money before they can go and make money for themselves and take care of their family. If those colleges sign those players, they see a family's impoverished, they should make sure that family is left with some money. They should make sure that brothers and sisters, that football player or that basketball player are able to get a scholarship to go to the same college. And they should also make sure that the parents get a chance to at least go see the kids play. Do you realize that a significant number of parents of African-American athletes have never seen their sons play in basketball or football in an away game? That's sad. That's hardly any commitment whatsoever. So I just want to say one other thing, Neil, and I'm going to cut it short because, like I said, I got to go sing happy birthday to Mrs. Rye, who is 93 today, that we really have to be, and as Pamela said, we have to work together. We got to make sure that we create and stand for fairness and equity for all. And I'm really encouraging white women in business to come with me and raise hell about leveling the playing field. Now, I know the husband bring all the money home to you, but if you want to go on your own, you're going to have a problem. So I would suggest you stand with us and make sure there's equity. Thank you very much.